There has been an absolutely horrific update in regard to the P. Diddy allegations, but more specifically, other people were named in this specific lawsuit filed on March 7th. But an individual that we're going to be focusing on today goes by the name Druski. He's a pretty popular YouTuber who's collabed with Kai Cenat and Kevin Hart in one of Kai's live streams, and he also has a couple of TV shows that he puts on, and you probably recognize some of the funny moments from his auditions for some of these TV shows.
You said Wazam, little
Say Wazam, little bitch.
Yeah, get him the fuck out of here.
God damn, man. You fat motherfucker.
Now, I took it upon myself this morning to read through most of that 87-page document that went over and detailed the allegations that are being made against Druski and the other people. I just want to be upfront with you guys. When I first read through this, there were points where I was in actual disbelief at what I was reading. That isn't to say I don't believe them, but it's just the weight and size of what they are talking about and what they're alleging is, number one, gruesome and horrific. But number two, it paints this group of people, P. Diddy and the other people that are alleged, as people working together as some part of an organization, a syndicate for these disgusting and depraved acts. That is like, it's hard to wrap your head around that people would organize and do what they're being alleged to have done. I'm going to be going over some of the pieces of this, but to keep my video, or I should say my channel, from getting demonetized, I will not be including a good chunk of what's going on. I'll include a link in the description for the entire court case. The allegations take up roughly half of the document towards the beginning. You can find it on your own, but it is genuinely stuff that I just am not comfortable covering on my channel for fear of those things happening. Now, these are some of the names of the defendants. We have Sean Combs, aka P. Diddy, as well as, like I had said earlier, Druski, Odell Beckham Jr. as well, John Pelletier. If I butcher some of these names, I apologize, but some of these you're going to recognize, and I'll flesh out some of these other individuals as we continue on. So shout out to this individual here, the Diddy docket. They included a nice little thread, including some of the major points from this court filing. So we're going to take a look at some of these. But as they say here, the plaintiffs allege that they were kidnapped at gunpoint by alleged Diddy co-conspirator John Pelletier and transported to his residence, then traveled to California in a convoy that included Christina Coram. Now, for those who don't know, this is a post from Diddy himself saying, "Meet Christina Coram, Chief of Staff at Combs Enterprises. Christina, aka KK, keeps everything in my life and my business running. She's been my right hand for the last 8 years and has consistently proven to execute and get shit done. Don't know how I'd function without her." And then this other name that you're seeing, John Pelletier, is the chief of police at the Maui Police Department. But before they were chief of police at the Maui Police Department, as we can see from this news story, was also originally the former Las Vegas Metro Police captain, and he has brought his tarnished reputation and whatnot to Maui, and he's been accused of negligence and corruption. So in this part of the case, they say defendant Pelletier put a gun to plaintiff John Doe's back and instructed him to get into a black SUV regarding extraditing plaintiff for warrants to California. Plaintiff didn't have any warrants nor convictions. They demanded to be shown the warrants, and defendant Pelletier refused and threatened to shoot plaintiffs if they protested further. So keep in mind, this guy was potentially in uniform, or was actually able to show that they were indeed a police officer. I mean, they were the chief of police. So in a situation like that, it makes sense that they would listen to them, especially if they were being held at gunpoint. And then the plaintiffs go on to say that they were then transported to what they believe was defendant Pelletier's residence in Las Vegas. They were then ordered inside and brought into the living room and forced to sit on the couch and were physically restrained. Plaintiffs demanded to speak to their attorney, which was refused, ignored, or met with threats of violence. Became obvious to plaintiffs that this was not a legal arrest and that Pelletier was acting outside of color of law. And then they were put back into the SUV and driven around. And they also make mention of the fact that they had heard these individuals, Pelletier and someone named Gonzalez, they had a list, which upon information and belief was a list of safe houses which they could allow parties a safe respite undetected. So different places for them to stop and take a breather when they were bringing, people, potentially victims like these individuals, to wherever they needed to go. And from their perspective through this story, as they were repeatedly blindfolded, they had earplugs put in, but sometimes they would be able to get them to fall out and listen. They also had music playing in the SUV, but the plaintiffs go on to make the claim that the defendant Pelletier appeared to be in charge and he and defendant Valdez were both giving out orders to other co-conspirator defendants. Plaintiffs overhear repeated conversations in the vehicle while being kidnapped and transported about following protocol made by defendant Pelletier to others. Upon information and belief, this protocol was agreed upon codes including the use of communication apps like WhatsApp and/or Snapchat, satellite phones, and referring to other co-conspirator defendants by their middle names. It was apparent to plaintiffs this was a professional operation/syndicate. Plaintiffs were then trafficked from Las Vegas, Nevada to various locations throughout California. So they continue on talking about them stopping at different safe houses, and while they were going from safe house to safe house, there was some type of altercation that the plaintiffs are alleging where the owners of the home didn't want to be involved with whatever was going on. And then upon information and belief, this location they were at was approximately 20 miles from the home in Orinda where plaintiff Parham was assaulted. Now, plaintiff Parham was the individual who was allegedly assaulted by Druski and multiple others that we're going to go over shortly. And then someone who you've heard to is referred to by KK. They notice at one point that during a stop, they noticed that defendant KK was a part of the convoy. And then later on, they were brought to a hotel, the Beacon Grand Hotel, Sir Francis Drake. Defendant Shane worked at the hotel as a manager, and defendant Shane, of course, is someone else that is referred to in this filing. And in here, we can see that once inside the hotel room, plaintiffs were beaten and drugged by defendants Valdez and Gonzalez. Plaintiffs pleaded with Valdez and Gonzalez to be released and for mercy. Defendant Valdez and Gonzalez instructed plaintiffs to sign paperwork at gunpoint. When plaintiffs refused, defendant Gonzalez would pistol whip plaintiffs on the back of their heads. And then at some point, they were given a drink which caused them to pass out. And they spent the night at the hotel while these two individuals, Gonzalez and Valdez, were taking turns watching them. Like I said earlier, from reading this, it genuinely felt like this was like Taken, like one of those action movies where they take people, hold them hostage, and are trying to get something out of them. If this is true, this is horrific and organized to a level that I don't think anyone was expecting. And I'm not saying that to sow any doubt across people that are taking a look at this or going through it. I don't know if it's true or not. I know that it's going to court at the very least, but I think a lot of my uncertainty just comes from the fact that this just sounds too big and too orchestrated to be true. But that's coming from someone who's pretty naive and has not dealt with organized crime to any large degree outside of like my brothers teaming up on me in Monopoly. So I don't have anything to go off of here. And I wasn't keeping super up to date with the P. Diddy stuff when it was first coming out. So a lot of this is new to me just in general. Moving on, the next day, the next morning, plaintiffs were restrained and bound by their hands in front and were placed into a vehicle. Plaintiffs then saw defendants Jaguar and Helena. Plaintiffs were then transported to the location of plaintiff Parham's brutal assault on Loma Vista Drive by defendants Jaguar and Helena. Defendant Helena, I'm sorry if I keep switching, was the driver and the defendant Jaguar was the passenger. And they told the plaintiffs that they would have to shoot them if they tried to escape or run. They also complained that they better not throw up in the car or get sick. And the plaintiffs said that they recognized Helena as she had filed a lawsuit against superstar singer Michael Jackson in 2005 and filed a creditor's claim against the Jackson estate upon his untimely demise in 2009. Plaintiffs were familiar with Helena from that previous Michael Jackson lawsuit and had previously met with the defendant at her home in West Hollywood to determine the credibility of her claims and if they were similar in nature to plaintiffs. And the plaintiffs had reported Helena multiple times to the LA and OC FBI field offices for her role in the crime syndicate with defendants Pelletier, Valdez, and other individuals. But the reason we're talking about them meeting for credibility in regard to allegations about Michael Jackson. So John and Jane Doe are the two plaintiffs, but both of these individuals, John and Jane, had met with Diddy through their connections in the music industry, as plaintiff John Doe was a previous plaintiff against Michael Jackson for assault as a minor. That's probably why they had met at that time, and that's why we're talking about the credibility of those claims that Helena had made, because this individual clearly had already gone through court in regard to this. But to tie this back to having Druski involved, going on, plaintiffs noticed that these defendants, that being Helena and Jaguar Wright, they noticed they had large brown bags and manila envelopes full of cash that was banded. It appeared they were separating the large sums of cash to distribute as they were placing cash into the manila envelopes. Defendant Jaguar discussed with defendant Helena how the party started the first black-owned network. Upon information and belief, plaintiffs believed that network to be Revolt TV. Now they go on and discuss the other co-conspirators, but referred to them by their middle names. Natasha, who is KK, Pedro being Gonzalez, Lyra being Valdez, Cornelius being the middle name for Odell Beckham, and Larry, shortened for Lawrence, or Defendant Pelletier, the chief of police. And then apparently, when Defendant Jaguar said Cornelius, it upset Defendant Helena, who said that defendants Odell and Druski were her clients and nothing better happened to them, and plaintiffs better not say anything about them, or she would have plaintiffs killed. And they were then told that they would be getting brought to John, that being Diddy. And as we can see, this is Helena Harris Scott, who we've been mentioning about prior, and she is, among other things, a bail bond agent. Now we're gonna get into some pretty horrific stuff, so I'm just warning you right now, if you're eating something, or if this is not something that you want to hear read out, giving you this heads up right now. The plaintiffs go to this location where the assault of the plaintiff Parham occurred. They make mention of Druski again, and they say shortly after, defendant Druski appeared wearing a vest and shorts, and he engaged in conversation with plaintiffs. Plaintiffs tried to appeal to defendant by talking about the music industry, and defendant instructed plaintiffs that they should cooperate. So Druski allegedly saying that they should cooperate with all the people involved in what was going on. Plaintiff described what they observed during the assault of plaintiff Parham after this interaction with defendant Druski. John and Jane Doe observe plaintiff Parham having an IUD forcefully placed in her vagina by defendants KK with the assistance of defendant Brandy. Plaintiffs heard defendant KK make a remark about how plaintiff Jane Doe would not need an IUD because of her age. While hearing plaintiff Parham scream in agony during the forced IUD insertion, plaintiff Jane Doe yelled, "Stop hurting her." Plaintiffs observed defendant Shane place a pillow over plaintiff Parham's face, suffocating her, and plaintiff Jane Doe yelled for them to stop or that she would die. Continuing on, plaintiff Jane Doe believes plaintiff Parham did lose consciousness because she became limp and unresponsive. Defendant Diddy instructed defendant Valdez to shut her up. Defendant Valdez hit Jane Doe with the handle of his firearms. Now, plaintiff John Doe witnessed plaintiff Parham being assaulted by the remote, and when he tried to say something, plaintiff was told to shut up or they would put the remote in him next. And then plaintiff John Doe believes he heard defendant Jaguar make remarks like, "Put that remote in her, she's going to learn today," and telling plaintiff Parham that she was going to make it worse. The plaintiffs believed the remote assault was to punish plaintiff Parham for the IUD failure. Plaintiffs heard defendant KK remark to defendants Diddy and Druski that she needed to keep them sufficiently drugged and revealed a bag full of drugs and paraphernalia. Defendant KK appeared to be dispersing doses to defendants, asking them their weights to administer the proper amount. At some point, plaintiff John Doe was taken to the bathroom. While in the bathroom, he believed there may have been other tenants and began to bang on the walls, hoping someone would hear him, but the only person who heard him was defendants Valdez and Gonzalez, who were kept outside keeping watch. Upon plaintiff John Doe's return, he saw defendant Odell. Now, we've kind of danced around Druski's involvement in this, but now I'm going to be going over the allegations that Druski had raped this woman. Now, this is from the actual court document, but I am going to be blocking some stuff out just, again, for YouTube's sake. But going on, defendant Diddy then instructed another defendant Doe to also rape plaintiff. Defendant Doe has been determined to be defendant Druski. Instead of immediately plaintiff, defendant Druski doused plaintiff with more oil/lubricant and then jumped on top of plaintiff's naked and oiled body, treating it like a slip and slide and knocking the wind out of plaintiff due to his enormous size. Defendant Druski then caught himself from sliding over plaintiff's oiled body and off the bed. He then began plaintiff vaginally. While defendant Druski was plaintiff, defendant Diddy sat in a chair near the bed and began masturbating while recording plaintiff's rape by defendant Druski. Another party's phone fell on the bed near plaintiff. Plaintiff then attempted to grab the phone, but it slipped out of her hands and onto the floor due to the oil and lubricant that had been doused all over her person by defendants Diddy and Druski. Defendant Diddy began laughing at plaintiff's attempt to grab the phone. Plaintiff's body was becoming more and more limp over the course of the violent until eventually she had no control over her body, nor could she move her body. When defendant Druski finished plaintiff, defendant KK entered the room to examine the condition of plaintiff, who was barely able to move or control her bodily functions. That was a horrific read. And a lot of people have also kind of started pushing back on these allegations and claims that have been made. One of the points being made is just kind of how they describe what happened. Like this inclusion of them describing that Druski was like going on top of them and jumping on like a slip and slide is bizarre. It doesn't really seem to make sense why they'd include it. Now, unfortunately, that might just be the truth of it. Like that might be what the plaintiff described the experience as, which could explain that. I'd like to hear what you guys think and your thoughts on this, but another large point that has been being made is that Druski wasn't a very popular individual at the time that this happened. So it doesn't make sense that he would be connected with Diddy or any of these other people involved. Keep in mind that the allegations being presented were in regard to a situation that happened, I believe, back in 2018. People have brought up the fact that you can see Druski appearing in a music video like this from T Grizzly, where I'm from, back in 2018. So even before he had a huge following or anything like that, he was still showing up in these pretty big music videos. Something important to note with T Grizz is that they were signed to 300 Entertainment, which has connections with P. Diddy. I will say business-wise, there's a lot of like stretches to be made to get it connected to Diddy, but we don't have to just hold on to that. We can also see that Druski has talked about the fact that he was friends with the sons of Diddy. And in tandem with that, he would also hang out with Odell Beckham Jr., who's also been named in this lawsuit.
What were the freak-offs like?
I never have been to a freak-off. I don't think. But I think a lot of people saying like, oh, I left before. A lot of that's bullshit, man.
Oh, yeah,
everybody's like, oh, I left before. That's bullshit.
A lot of hands up right now.
Yeah, a lot of, everybody's doing. But, I never really, I think I was friends with his sons. So I always was just like, anytime I would be like around there, like even how like the commercial I did with Deleon or whatever, that transpired from like being around his sons.
Really?
Like, we would go to like different places in LA. It was like me, his sons, Odell, whoever.
Now that's interesting as he connects himself to interacting with all these people and the fact that he has been to Diddy parties. But on top of that, he had actually recently done a podcast kind of interview thing with Shane Gillis. It was on episode 542 called Indulgences featuring Druski. But more importantly, I wanted to showcase Druski's behavior when Shane and his co-host bring up these Diddy parties.
Were you at any of the Diddy parties or did you miss that?
What the where did that come from? How did that? Of all questions.
Wait, did you miss that train?
How did that go?
That train might have left the
that
station,
train took
but
off
you
from
were
the
right
station.
there.
Yeah,
You
that
were
train,
right there to get on
train
that.
took off from the station for sure.
You were close.
Yeah. I wasn't at that train station.
You left early? You left early?
No, that was down the street from me. I wasn't there. No.
Did you ever meet Diddy?
Yo, what the fuck?
Bro, yo, I forgot you
He's
actually
like, yo,
might have.
I've seen pictures with you there.
Here's another video of him admitting to the fact that he was at some of Diddy's parties.
You ever been to one of Diddy parties?
Yeah, I've been in attendance. I've been in attendance. Not, hey, what the fuck you smirking for?
How you saying that?
I've been in attendance.
He just asking regular
That's all
questions.
I said. That's all I said. I said I've been in attendance. I have been in attendance.
We never been. We just asking.
We just
Yeah,
asked.
yeah. As soon as you asked, he said,
You had fun?
I ain't seen that.
"Yeah, you did.
Yeah,
Yeah, I had fun. Yeah, I mean, it was a party. I wasn't at one of them parties.
Oh, we ain't say that about what party. What party you talking about? What party you talking about?
I have been in attendance at a puff party. You know what I'm saying? I've been in attendance. Yeah, I went. But I ain't. Yeah, nah. I don't know which party. The party I went to. It was girls turn up, you know what I'm saying? The regular, you know what I mean?
So yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, Druski could also just be saying, no, I wasn't at the parties that you're referring to, being, these weird sexual ones that people were getting assaulted in. Or he could also just be trying to distance himself from all of that going on, because that's a huge PR nightmare waiting to happen. Even just theoretically having it shake out where Druski is innocent of anything that's been coming out in regard to this court case, him putting himself close to anything that had been going on is already just a really bad move for him. So I can understand why he would be really apprehensive to say that he was friends with Diddy's sons, or just, being at that location. At the same time, yeah, he could also be freaking out, and he could be really uncomfortable in the way that he was answering those questions and just being so apprehensive and weird because of what has come out, because these allegations might actually hold some weight. But Druski himself did also come forward to release a statement in regard to the allegations made. He posted it on his Twitter, but this came from his Instagram, from what I understand. He says, "This allegation is a fabricated lie. I wasn't a public figure in 2018. I was broke living with my mom without any connections to the entertainment industry at the time of this allegation. So the inclusion of my name is truly outlandish. My heart breaks for actual victims of abuse, but I'm fully confident that the evidence will expose this falsehood and the individuals who are maliciously trying to game the legal system to peddle false narratives." And Odell also replied saying, "Boy, I'll tell you what, this world makes absolutely no sense. I'm covered by God. I know who am I know who you are. Keep your head. That name will be cleared. Shit's stupid. He very clearly seems pretty uncomfortable, and I'm very interested to see how this stuff ends up shaking out when it goes to court. But truly, I'm very interested to see what you guys have to say, what your guys' thoughts are in regard to what has come out. If any of you take the time to read the court case, I'd love to see some of your comments, but it is genuinely horrific from head to toe. And I hope I did an adequate job of covering most of the stuff that's connecting Druski. But that's it for the video today. I'll see you guys later. Adios. See ya. Bye.